Hey there, Dave Paulides, CanAm Missing Project, copyrighted edition for our video channel. Thanks for being here, villagers, friends, trolls, enemies of the state, whoever else may be gathered around. It's been a rough week for me. I won't go into a lot of details, but some weeks seem to fly by. This week was a bear. So before we get started, I'd like everyone to go out, get something warm to drink. Go in your cabinet, get out that almond croissant, cinnamon roll. Sit back, relax. I've got 3 riveting stories for you. I think they're some of the best. And got some great letters for you. This is only a missing persons video, so everyone give it a thumbs up. So before we get into the missing people cases, I always have a big stack of letters for you. In this episode, they're pretty good. I like them. Hey Dave, it's very difficult to know that you're in so much emotional pain, that there's so much suffering to be endured during this life. Many years ago, my son and I used to go for long walks. We talked about anything and everything, which I really enjoyed for one reason, being able to possibly pass along some wisdom to him. Like you, my wife and I were given a son. And as you fully know, there's no deeper love than the ones for one's child. My heart and prayers go out for you. And I can imagine that every split second feels like an eternity. And I'm sure that this will last a long time. You know, it does sometimes. Today there were a couple of times that just kicked my butt. And I can't really explain to you why it happens or that it's going to happen. Heck, I can be around a room full of people and have an overwhelming wave of anxiety, depression hit me. I can't explain it. So yeah, I feel exactly how this person explains. None of us knows exactly what this life is all about, and mankind will never know. I don't think we're allowed to know, but through experience of time, I can say for sure that whatever this is all about, it's about love. If you think about all the pain and suffering and strife one has to go through during their life, to have it end in 85 or so years would be a total waste of nature's energy, effort, and intent if there wasn't something else after this life here on earth. I fully believe this. While on a long walk with my son one day many years ago, we got talking about life as we often did. I knew one day my son would be leaving the nest, so I like to talk about things that could keep him going along the way for his future journey. I think one of the most important things I told him was to never ask for an easy path in life, but to ask for strength. The word ask could be substituted with the word pray and or the word seek. I explained that there are unforeseeable difficulties along the way in life, and there is no way around it. Probably much physical and emotional pain to endure at times. I also explained that to really get the most out of life, no matter how long or short that life may be, means to experience the pain along with the joy. So pray for strength to endure, and to endure without becoming hardened in your heart. Good advice. I see you're doing, Dave, so somewhere along the line you had a good teacher. You will see Ben again, and it will be a most joyous day. In the meantime, keep building and experiencing this life to the fullest, moment by moment. You're already doing that. You're going to be okay. Maybe one day, you'll write a book to help others through the same type of thing. I can see you doing that. In the meantime, my friend, ask for strength. The first time I read that letter, I sat back in my chair. Got pretty depressed. Strength comes from people around you. Comes from a reserve of strength you have. You know, a long time ago, I was taking a class in college. And one of the professors was talking, and he says, you know, life's a series of deposits and withdrawals. And you always want to have a bank full of deposits, because the day that a withdrawal hits you, you got to have those reserves to live off of. And you see, for me, I probably needed to get a big loan at the bank to keep going, because sometimes I don't think I have those deposits in there to keep me going. And what I mean by that is I don't mean I'm going to die or something. It's just an emotional wreck. And those emotional deposits that keep my account full sometimes are lacking. I've had people very close to me say, Dave, you got to stop doing the research and stop talking about missing people. I've had a lot of people tell me that. And the reason they say that is that it's an emotional drain, day in and day out. And that's what people see on the outside when they look in. And they see all of the sad stories, death. There's not a lot of good times for these people. And they see me as being in the middle of that, and that continues to drag me down. My counter to that is that there's a lot of good things that have come out of this. I think I've helped some people. I've heard stories where people say that, you know, they got a personal locator beacon, they're much more aware in the outdoors. Or I'm going to read you a note in a second that really made me feel good. But life being a series of deposits and withdrawals, it always has stuck with me. And every time I go out in the public, I'm trying to do something to bring my deposits up. And it doesn't take a lot, folks. I was at the store the other day, and some older lady was pushing a cart and having a tough time getting over just a little bump in the concrete. And we were right near the front door, and grabbed the front of her cart and pulled it, held the door open for her. Just a little thing. She smiled and said, "Oh, thanks." Yeah. She probably forgot about it in half a minute. But the point is that try to do something good. And it's those things you do when nobody's looking that really count. Next letter. Hey, Dave. Me and my son, thank you. Just a few weeks after your tragedy with Ben, I think it was in one of the first shows you did after you lost him, we were fixing his car, and something made me put you on so I can listen to it while we fixed it. And the grief that was coming through your voice made me ask my son if he's ever thought about suicide. Started to explain to him how unfair it was for somebody to do it, to such a thing to a father. Don't take that as any disrespect towards Ben. I was thinking about how I'm sure he would have done things differently if he would have known what it did to you. My son replied with a shocking statement. He told me that he actually had been thinking a lot about that very thing for the last 2 weeks. So much so, he lifted up his shirt and showed me where he had made multiple practice cuts. I immediately freaked out and got him help that he needed. I don't think it would have happened if he hadn't heard you speaking that day on it. Because he left me no indications before this day that this had been going on in his life. I know you get a lot of letters expressing gratitude towards you. I want you to know I really believe your grief helped me connect with my son in a way that got him the help he needed. Thank you so much. Wow. So I've had a few of those over the last year. That is a blessing. I wrote back to this man that you need to keep on with that son. Keep talking to him. And yeah, get him the help. That is the end. Things can take strange turns, just like me today. Hitting a wall of depression. Unexpected. That could happen to anybody. Happen to your son. Thanks for the letter. Let me know I'm doing some bit of good somewhere. I don't think, let me tell you a quick story. There was a boy here in high school senior here in the Flathead Valley that was an outstanding student, good kid, really good kid. Spoke to the city council, spoke to the student body about suicide because they had a lot at their high school. How you got to stay on it, how you got to fight it. Nobody had any indications that this boy had depression in his life. But not long after he gave that speech to the student body, he took his own life. I've never met the parents. But I know the feeling that they have. Again, this kid was athlete, great scholar, student body president. Yeah, it can happen to anybody. I encourage you, all those parents out there, I don't care how old your son or daughter is, everybody's going through rough times right now. Get closer to them. And don't be afraid to have that conversation. Because as I've said 100 times, some people are afraid to bring it up because it might implant the thought in their minds. Friends, that thought's been in their minds. If it's on your mind, it's been on their mind. So have that conversation. So I've talked to you guys and ladies many times that I've met people who have had strange things happen to them in the woods. And I've had many of you write to me about them, and I appreciate that because I only read maybe 1% of maybe 1 to 5% of the stories I get. I'm referring them to you and I'm reading them to you, but this next one is pretty good. And it involves a location up in Oregon at a place called the Sky Lakes Wilderness, very close to Crater Lake National Park. Back in '73, 3 older guys from work heard that I went deer hunting every year and hunted alone most of the time. They were also impressed that I also started bow hunting back in '66 when I was in high school. These guys were all in their 60s and I was in my 20s. They invited me to go deer hunting. I'm sorry. This story's in Minnesota. I got ahead of me. Thief River Falls, Minnesota. I said, sure. So the first week in November 73, we headed out to northern Minnesota for the rifle deer opener. Saturday morning, we all went out on our own to hunt. I walked out about a half mile, found a great spot where the woods ended. There was a big swamp. We all agreed to meet back on the dirt road at 9:30 a.m., go back to the camp to eat breakfast and make some drives, and go back for the evening hunt. It was a cloudy morning. Clouds were hanging real low in the sky. I had a moose walk within 10 yards and hid behind a big tree as he passed by. I looked at my watch and saw it was 9 a.m., so I should be heading back. As I started back, I was skirting the swamp and started feeling something weird. I keep hearing a humming sound, trying to figure out where it's coming from. The sound reminded me of the way we would hear big power lines hum when we were young. We're out in the boonies, though. There was nothing around for miles. I started walking into the swamp in the direction of the sound. It was coming from the clouds. My face started getting numb, and I knew something wasn't right. I pointed my rifle up into the direction of the sound. All I remember is taking the safety off my rifle, and the next thing I was walking along the edge of the woods towards the road. I could see the guys on the road all were yelling at me. "Where have you been yet?" they yelled. "We've been looking for you all day. Are you on drugs or what?" I told them that I've never done drugs in my life. I told them my watch says it's 9:30 a.m. They said it's almost 5 p.m. and I screwed up their hunt for the day. Here's where it gets weird. Well, that's pretty weird right there. While I was sleeping that night in the camper, I had a dream of a fox coming towards me in the woods. I looked at the fox and noticed it had real big eyes. I yelled out, "You're not a fox," raised my rifle, aimed, and woke up. I was soaking wet with sweat. So much that my long johns and sleeping bag were so wet you could wring them out. One of the guys woke up and asked if I was okay. I changed into a different set of long johns, and the guys had a bunch of old army blankets that I was giving to sleep in. Before I went back to sleep, I looked outside and noticed we were having a blizzard, about 8 inches of snow that night. The next morning, I decided to go back where I was hunting. The morning before I saw that, and couldn't find out what happened. Didn't see anything. My watch never worked again. My wife bought my watch for my birthday. It was a Pulsar digital watch, the first of its kind in 73. Paid a lot of money for it. I took it back to where she bought it, and they told me they couldn't figure out why it wasn't working. They said they were sending it back to the company to get it fixed. They called me in a week later and said that the company couldn't figure out why they couldn't get it to work, so they gave me a new one. I only told 4 people in my life about this, and everyone, including my wife, started laughing. One started making the sound of the theme The Twilight Zone. Pretty much kept it to myself after that. I've watched almost every one of your videos you've put out, and enjoy every one, and I'm always waiting for the next one each week. Thinking about it, it could have been one of those missing. Thanks for everything you do. You're doing a great job. Keep it up. Thank you. Couple things. The humming sound. That's pretty good. Now, again, I'm a MUFON investigator, so I've heard all of this stuff before. I've heard this sort of thing many times. There's people who have written reports within MUFON that have said that UFOs hide in clouds. I've read other reports that said the UFOs can make clouds that they hide in. That's pretty interesting. And like this gentleman said, the sound was coming from the clouds. And when he pointed his rifle at it, it almost sounds like something perceived a threat and moved on him first. Good story. Next one. I have a couple of things that I'd like to say before I tell you about an experience while backpacking in Southern Oregon. Okay, here comes the story south of Crater Lake. First, I want to say that I'm glad you've recovered from your COVID symptoms. 99.9%. Also understand your frustrations with YouTube. I'm currently experiencing the same type of thing with Facebook. I've had my account frozen several times over the last few weeks for no particular reason. They want a picture or video of me before they will release the account. What good would that do? They won't tell me. They've given no reason for the account to be frozen. They simply send an email that they won't respond to. Additionally, there's no phone number to call, no actual person to talk with. Let me tell you when I lost respect for Facebook. I had a personal account and the account that's up now, the 411 account on Facebook. And there was a guy in Vietnam that decided he was going to copy my name, copy my pictures, and be Dave Paulides. So I contacted Facebook, gave him the link, and guess what they did? They took down my account. I responded to them 3 times. They refused to put my account back up. 146 personal contacts gone, never saw it again. The moral of the story, don't complain or we'll take you down. Now, the guy in Vietnam, he's still up. Yeah. So, I'm with you. Not a big fan of Facebook. I'm on there, but I don't post very often other than the videos. They won't give me a phone number to call or no actual person to talk with. Also, I understand your decision not to attend the Bigfoot Festival. I've tried talking with a few of these people in the past and I found them to be a bit odd. I really question their motives. When I contacted them, I was hoping to share some stories and maybe validate some of my experiences. I quickly learned just to keep my stories to myself and move forward without them. Even tried contacting Dr. Jeff Meldrum at one point, but he never responded. I'm just one of a number of basically normal outdoor people who have had some strange things happen. We're not looking for any notoriety, just looking for people to listen and share an experience. This is exactly why I don't want my name used. Well, no problem with that here. I never read anybody's name, or try not to. The experience took place in the middle of the 1990s. I'm an experienced person in the woods, hunt, fish, hike, backpack, treasure hunt, anytime I get a chance. The more remote the area, the better. I'm in my middle 60s now and have done this my whole lifetime. During this particular backpacking trip, 3 of us hiked into the 7 Lake Basin of the Sky Lakes Wilderness area, southern Oregon. We're going to fish the lakes over a 3-day period. The 3 of us have backpacked together many times before, and this was just a routine trip. We each carry an inflatable raft, food, sleeping bags, and personal things. One of us will carry a tent that we share. I always carry a firearm. This time I had a .357 Magnum. We got to the lake, Grass Lake, about midday, set up camp, inflated the rafts, and went fishing. Typically, we will catch and release most of the fish and maybe keep 1 or 2 each for dinner. We fished until it was almost dark, came back to the camp, built a fire, and had dinner. We sat around the fire for a while, talked, and just sat around and looked at the tremendous number of stars that you can imagine unless you've been in this remote areas like this. Stop there for a second. So, I've spent a ton of time in Crater Lake and around Crater Lake. There's a lot of bears. Big bears. Black bears can be dangerous. So carrying a gun into these areas is smart. We all decided to go to bed about the same time, about 2 a.m. About the same time. At about 2 a.m., I was awakened by something walking in the distance. At first, I thought it might be another hiker. People often walk the trails by moonlight. After a few seconds, I was kind of put on alert when I realized that whatever was walking was moving very fast, getting closer to the tent very quickly. Was walking on 2 feet and was coming down the hill behind the tent, walking through a blown down timber and not walking on the trail. As I got close to the tent, maybe 5 to 10 feet, it broke some branches on the ground as it walked by. I was shocked at how heavy the footsteps felt. I could feel them with each step. Heard this many times. You can almost feel like the ground shake. I could feel the stride and the weight of the animal. It was very large, and the only thing I could think of, this .357 Magnum is way too small. Chose the wrong gun. As this animal walked by the tent, now what's interesting is this person used the word animal like 4 times in his memo. How do you know it was an animal? Just a question. How do you know it was an animal? How come it couldn't have been a person? How come it couldn't have been a relic person? As this animal walked by the tent, our fire was still smoldering. There was still some light from the coals. Our backpacks were outside the tent, along with 3 rafts and other stuff. Whatever walked by had no interest in us, the tent, the fire, or the backpacks. It never broke stride, just walked by the tent, went to the lake, and splashed around, then walked straight away. I have to admit that I didn't have the nerve to get up and look to see what just walked by. When I looked over at the other 2 guys, they were both laying there frozen looking up at the top of the tent. None of us moved for a long while. Finally, I fell back to sleep. In the morning, none of us wanted to talk about it. One of the guys walked down to the lake and found some large footprints in the mud. We looked at them and decided that whatever that was, it meant no harm, and we finished the weekend fishing trip without any incidents. As I've mentioned earlier, I've had other incidents. Never actually seen anything, but I've been followed, paralleled at night while archery hunting and returning to the vehicle. Had rocks and sticks thrown during the day, heard whistles, all within a few miles of this wilderness area. I will also say that I've not been alone when these incidents have taken place. It'd be nice to find other people in the local area who have had similar experiences. There aren't many places to go where people won't judge you as a nutcase. I don't have any desire to shoot or harm any of these animals. However, I would love to actually see this thing and just acknowledge the fact that they're around us. Take care, Dave. Well, let me just tell you guys that sometimes seeing something will change your life for the worse. You may never want to go back to the areas again, knowing something that large, that big, that strong exists in this world. This occurred just miles south of Crater Lake. FYI. Next letter. Dave, huge fan. My dad was too before he passed last year. We'd watch your videos together, and I bought him one of your books for his birthday. Lately, I found myself re-watching the episodes that we watched together. I know that losing my dad cannot compare to the loss of Ben. We were both sorry to hear the news. Losing my dad was miserable. I can't imagine losing one of my children. Wish you all the best. Last year was punishing. Some thoughts. Invisibility technology. I'm not sure if you've seen this or if it's a deep fake video, but I believe it will interest you if you've not seen it. Quantum technology cloth may be something that you share with everyone. It's true. There's a technology out there, and it almost looks like a blanket, and you put it in front of you, and it blends in completely with your environment. It looks like you're looking right through your body at the landscape behind you. On a personal matter, searching for a similar experience, I've wanted to write to you for some time and ask if you've heard of any similar story to the one that I have. It's not exactly in line with missing people, but I thought based on the many letters you've read in your videos that you may have received or heard of something similar. It was 97. I just graduated from Syracuse University and had moved home to New Jersey. I needed to return to Syracuse a week after I had left to close out my apartment, get what I had left, and return a canvas tarp that I had borrowed from a boss. My boss lived outside of Syracuse off of Route 20, about 15 minutes drive from Interstate 81. My plan was to pack up the remaining furniture, get my deposit back, see a few people, head back 4 hours to New Jersey, stopping at my boss's house to drop off the tarp. Route 20 was a 2-lane for each direction type highway and wasn't well lit. Sometimes the 2 northbound lanes would be separated from the southbound lanes by a median that was wooded because of the rolling landscape. It's upstate New York. The house I was headed to was at the bottom of a steep downhill with a double hump at the top. If you could see over the first hump, you still couldn't see over the second coming down. from the top or headed uphill from the bottom. I was not able to leave Syracuse until just after midnight. I headed south on 81, turned off of Interstate 81 and headed down Route 20, made a right turn off onto a street. Second or third house on the right, I dropped the tarp at Bob's driveway and drove off, turning back in onto Route 20, heading up the steep uphill. Headed back to 81. The time is just before 1 a.m., around 12:50. I checked the time when I would get home as I pulled away from this house. I recall thinking I should have left earlier in the evening now because I wouldn't get home till about 4 a.m. The perfect drive, especially for the East Coast. Listen to Coast AM for those hours on the East. Turned left at the end of the street, back onto Route 20, and headed up the hill that I had just come down a few minutes earlier. Just as I approached the first crest at the top of the hill on the right lane, I was forced to stop because the road was blocked by 3 deer. A large deer straddling the center lane and 2 smaller deer, each blocking the center of the 2 lanes. I started honking the horn, and they did not move. I opened and slammed the door. They wouldn't move. Deer in the headlights. I started honking the horn. They did not move. I opened and slammed the door. They wouldn't move. I started flashing the lights and honking the horn. When I was flashing lights on and off, I noticed that the deer were glowing. I got out of the car, but before I did, I rolled the window down because I did not want to get locked out. I always just do that because I had been locked out of a running car once before. I had the presence of mind to do that, so I know that I was in my right mind. Also, I don't drink, I never have, so I was not impaired. What I saw was unreal. Each deer had this aura of light around them. Not very bright though, but it was there. I was looking at a yellow-orange glow around each of them and looked for what felt like several minutes, 10 to 15 feet away. I couldn't understand what was happening. I thought I was seeing things because I was tired. I tried again to spook them by clapping my hands, yelling, stomping my feet, and slamming the car door. I get back into the car and kept flashing the lights, and they were glowing and wouldn't move. Just as I was thinking how this is impossible, I should just drive through them, and they would have to move, and then I heard something. I heard a car horn. I looked over to my right in the direction it was coming from, and through the woods I could see a car driving up the hill, flashing its light and honking its horn. I looked back and the deer were gone. I was in the oncoming traffic lanes and I could see light peeking over the upper part of the hill, getting brighter. I put the car in gear and drove onto the shoulder. Seconds after I got to the shoulder, traffic raced by, tractor trailers and cars, maybe 8 or 9 of them. I was shaken up and I was shaking like I was shivering. It was easily, I think, 10 minutes before I could get it together and drive. The window was up and I don't remember rolling it up. Normally, it would take me just under 4 hours to drive from Syracuse to my home in Monmouth County, New Jersey, sometimes 5 if there was really bad traffic or construction. Under 4 hours is possible because overnight there's virtually no traffic. I figured that I would have an extra half hour added to my trip to divert and stop and drop the tarp and then get back on 81 South for a complete trip of 4.5 hours. I didn't arrive home until after 7 a.m. I had left Syracuse proper at 12:15. I didn't check the time when I pulled off the shoulder. I know I did at some point on the remainder of the ride home, but I didn't compute that anything was extended or not normal until a day or 2 later. Looking back, the stop had to have added more time than it could have than the full 4 hours. It took longer than that to get home. The reason I'm sharing this is, have you ever heard of anything like this? I think about what happened almost every day, and I wanted to hear that something similar has happened to somebody else. I don't know what to think. Sometimes I think just some deer and I was stupid for making a wrong turn and not paying attention. Should have driven across the median and then turned left, but don't remember making a wrong turn. Apparently I did. I search online for videos and stories regularly of animals that show up and save people's lives. If you have heard something similar, let me know. Anyhow, I'm so hooked on the letters you read, the missing stories that you tell of, and now I think of your factual news videos are really great. Appreciate the work you do. Thanks for that story. So, I have my own story. about deer on a highway. Probably the weirdest is that I used to make dozens of drives between San Jose, I was living in Los Gatos at the time, and Hoopa up in Northern California when I was doing the research. And people had always told me that driving at night in bad weather, you see a lot of weird things up there and be real cautious. Well, one of the times I was making the drive, I got a late start, just like this man. It was probably about 6 or 7 o'clock. And it was raining like a monsoon. And I was near Crescent City, California. And this was a 2 lanes in each direction divided highway. And they had a big median with a cement barricade. And I mean, it was really raining. And I was going probably about 25 or 30 miles an hour. And not too far up ahead, I see a big buck standing, straddling the 2 lanes northbound. I couldn't believe it. It wasn't moving. It was just standing there. Had my headlights on, and it was pretty much dark out. It was winter. And I knew there was traffic coming up on me. I turned my flashing lights on, and I got closer and closer and closer. I figured this thing's going to move. It did not move. There was just enough room to get by on the right side, on the right side shoulder, go off the road, go around the deer. And then right behind the buck, there's 2 other does, big ones, standing like right in the middle of those 2 lanes. And I always thought, what are they doing in the middle of those lanes? Not moving. It's like they were statues. And other people have told me, well, if there's a predator in the woods, deer are smart enough to come into a camp or come into a public place because predators don't want to do that. I thought, was there a big predator in the woods just waiting to get these deer? I don't know. But that was a good story. I've never heard of anyone seeing an aura around animals. It's interesting. So the stories tonight. First story comes out of missing 411 hunters. And anybody here watch Oak Island on the History Channel? It's happened about 80 miles north of Oak Island in Nova Scotia. What happened was this man, right here, Harris, good, healthy, 87-year-old man, living in Parrsboro, Nova Scotia. Parrsboro is a very rural area. Right over here, the Bay of Fundy. Look it up. Weird place. So he lived in Parrsboro, but he owned a deer hunting area off of a road that was less than a half mile from the bay. Important point. Remember, I've always told you, water, water, water. Well, in this area near Parrsboro, Nova Scotia, there's a lot of open land, a lot of deer hunting area. Well, Harris, like I said, was in good health. He was a World War II vet, retired. And his stand was off of the Minas Basin. November 10th, 2010, he had lunch at home. And then he told his wife that he was going to go down to his hunting track and put some apples out for the deer. So he loaded up his truck, drove a short distance, probably less than 10 miles, parked his truck, got out, and walked the 300 yards to the deer stand. laid out the apples. That was about 1 o'clock. Well, his family knew he should have been back by 2:30. So his son went out at 3 o'clock, drove down to the site, truck's there, walked in, saw that the apples had been spread out. His dad wasn't around. Searched, yelled, nothing. Came back to the house, called the RCMP. Now, the response from the RCMP in this rural area of Nova Scotia was the best. They responded with over 100 searchers from 5 different jurisdictions. 2 helicopters from the Natural Resources Group with FLIR, 4 different dog teams. The police said that this area was rarely hunted. It had few people. And the idea that somebody would have seen him or another hunter would have been in the area, not realistic. Well, it was a 4-day search. They couldn't find any tracks leaving the area. They couldn't find a scent trail. They couldn't find anything. 87 years old. They said he had nothing related to dementia, Alzheimer's, thought clearly, was in good health. So where did he go? 87 years old. Now, I printed out a very close-up diagram of the road. So, Parrsboro is up in here. And this is the road that his hunting track was on. There's the bay. See how close it was? Very close. So the question is, what happened to Harris Hill? This happened, again, November 10th, 2010. So it's been 12 years. Where is he? Where'd he go? A lot of people can just cancel this if you wished. But as I've stated 100 times, when you bring in multiple dog teams and there's a scent trail, one of those dogs is going to pick it up. When you bring in trackers, they're going to find the tracks going out of that area. Again, the case makes no sense. The RCMP said that they were looking into all angles in an area that has almost no crime. I'm not sure what all angles really meant. Now, in Missing 411, a sobering coincidence, it's all about people that have disappeared and were found in water. And one of those cases that is just stunning to me, I'm going to talk to you about right after this next case. Next case, July 11th, 1921. Involves a young boy named George Moore, 7 years old. His family lived in Philadelphia. His dad worked for the Philly Railroad. And they took a work day off because the railroad was sponsoring a family day at a place called Rock Springs in Lancaster, PA. And George's family had a mom, a dad, and a sister and George. Well, this facility where they were having this party had a giant pool. They had a creek running through it and a baseball field. It was a great family atmosphere. There was a couple thousand railroad families there, a lot of people. Well, the family lost track of George, and in the afternoon they started looking for him. The sister said that she last saw George on the top step to the big pool into the shallow end. Well, then they found a witness at 4:30 that afternoon that saw George down by the baseball field near the creek. Well, that afternoon, the afternoon of July 11th, the Pennsylvania State Police, the local sheriff, the Lancaster City Police, all threw in and decided to go 100% in on the case. And first thing they did was they brought in dogs and they started to work the creek. Shoulder to shoulder, they walked it on the 12th. And on the night of the 11th, they didn't find anything. But on the 12th, everyone was out. They closed the facility, and they're looking in the big pool. In the afternoon of the 12th, they had drugged that pool 10 times and didn't find anything. Well, it's a big pool. And because they couldn't see the bottom in spots, the owner, he decided to drain it just to be 100% sure. So on July 12th, they had over 100 searchers there. They drained the pool. And multiple police officers and detectives searched that, didn't find anything. And they gave the okay to the owner to fill the pool again. So the owner was a man named H.B. Griffiths. On July 13th, in the early morning hours, while the pool was being filled, there was a night watchman. And just as daylight was coming up, the night watchman walked by the pool, and he found a body floating in it. Called the police. Police came out. It was George Moore. So with George, H.B. Griffith, the owner, was quoted in the paper as saying, "It was impossible for that child to be in that pool. Impossible." Now, just to give you some logistics, Rocky Springs still exists, Lancaster. Kind of get a feeling for the area around where this location was at. Why is this important? It was drugged multiple times. It was emptied. The last sighting of George wasn't even near the pool. How did he get in the pool? The coroner did an autopsy. Didn't find any injuries, no sexual assault. Said he drowned by freshwater drowning. Okay. Remember, I've talked to you guys before about GHB. GHB is produced in the body in minute quantities. If you're under the influence of GHB at a very high level, you can't move your extremities, but you kind of know you're alive and you know what's happening to you. And a lot of the cases where there was a second autopsy, in the cases I wrote about, the second autopsy found huge levels of GHB in the body. There was never any understanding of how that got in the bodies in missing 411, a sobering coincidence. Now, this next case, I think it's one of the most important cases in missing 411, a sobering coincidence, for a multitude of reasons. But it involves a young man named Cullen Fortney. He was 21 years old at the time. He went missing January 8th, 2006 in the early morning hours in downtown La Crosse, Wisconsin. La Crosse had had many students disappear and get found in the river. Now, he was a student at the University of Wisconsin in Madison, but he was on a holiday break at his parents' house. And on January 7th, he drove to a friend's house, spend the night with them in La Crosse, go out and party that night. They were at a place called John's Bar at 109 3rd Street in La Crosse. Here's downtown La Crosse. The bar is up here. This is the Mississippi River. Now, Cullen's in the bar. And the bar is about 1,000 feet from the Mississippi. At 1:30 to 2 a.m., in that time frame, his friends say they lost track of him. Now, friends, this is exactly what has been stated many, many times on disappearances from downtown rural settings. All of a sudden, the person's gone. There's no tracks in the snow leading to the river. There's no tracks leading anywhere. They're just gone. So his friends lose track of him. Now, I got to give credit where credit's due. There's a retired detective from the New York Police Department named Kevin Gannon. Now, Kevin was working missing persons cases for NYPD. And you started to see bodies showing up in the rivers around New York. And they weren't making sense to him. And rather than just, put in your time and go home, Kevin was a critical thinker, is a critical thinker. And he decided that he was going to start investigating these at a higher level. Well, he found out that where the person went in the river, sometimes they were found upstream, still in the water, or the time they were missing didn't equal to the time they should have been in the water, or unknown causes of death. I mean, it was bizarre what he was finding. Well, Kevin went out and interviewed Cullen Fortney about what happened to him that night. This is what Cullen says. He says the last thing he remembers was partying in the bar with his friends, dancing. The next thing he remembers is waking up in the Mississippi River, floating down it with icebergs around him. He says, I swam with the current until I could get to the shore, and I pulled myself on shore. He said, I don't think I was in that river more than 5 or 10 minutes max. He says that he pulls himself onto the shore and he looks up over the bank and he sees Gunderson Lutheran Medical Center, a hospital. The bar, the river, he floats down, pulls himself out, looks across, there's the medical center. You think the angels were following Cullen that day? The temperature of that river would have killed a normal man guaranteed in 15 minutes. Cullen couldn't have been in that river more than that time. He was missing $20 they thought he had, missing his hat, he was missing his shoes. Now, when he got into the hospital called the police. Police took his blood alcohol level and said it was 0.43%. Friend, that's near death. I couldn't drink that much. So let's just put this in perspective. I'm 6'1", 200 pounds. Every beer, 12-ounce beer I drink, that puts 0.02 percentage of alcohol into my system. So let's say I just guzzle 5 beers in 1 hour. Well, that would put 0.10 percentage of alcohol into my system. But every hour, my system works out of me 0.02%. So at the end of that hour, realistically, I have about 0.08 in my system. Now, Cullen was missing for at least 5 hours. 5 hours. So that means that 0.10 percentage of alcohol would have come out of his system. If he was 0.43, he would have been dead almost at 0.53. So how did he get that much alcohol in his system? And how was he able to swim to the shore and save himself when he was that intoxicated? And when you're that intoxicated, the body temperature is actually lower and you could die sooner. It's a very strange set of circumstances. Another big thing, Cullen had memory loss. He didn't know where he was for 5 hours. There's a lot of things about this case that are bold-faced lies. And you can read about them online. Supposedly, he told the police that he fell off a bridge. It's not what he told retired Detective Gannon. It's almost as though that the police in that jurisdiction were trying to find logical ways to explain how these men got into the river system. Cullen was the only man to get in the river and survive and live to talk about it. It's an amazing story. Now, it's too bad that they didn't test his blood and urine for GHB. I think it would have showed up at a very high level. Was he lucky? I don't know. Was he meant to survive? That's a good question. Seems like the angels were looking out for him when he pulls himself onto the bank next to the hospital. When you're all wet like that, and you pull yourself out of the water, hypothermia, wet clothes, gonna set in hard and quick. He's lucky he got in the hospital when he did. Very lucky. So, those are the three stories. George Moore, July 11th, 1921, ends up in a pool that was emptied. Drowns. How'd that happen? Harris Hill, 87 years old, a hunter, disappears. Parrsboro, Nova Scotia, never found. How far can an 87-year-old man go? In Cullen, Fortney, January 8th, 2006, Crosse. A story I'll never forget. So, I appreciate being here. I'm very grateful that I can educate the public the way I do. I don't mean to cast aspersions on any families, but when you go to a big event and you've got kids, you keep your kids in sight all the time. These big events attract pedophiles that aren't with the organization having the event. You need to watch out, and you need to take care of your children, especially when near water. I don't know what happened to George, but I think something extraordinary did. Harris Hill. I tell hunters to always hunt together. Never thought about telling hunters to go to your hunting stand together, just to lay out apples. Cullen, Fortney, I've written too many times about people disappearing at bars and nobody seeing them leave. How does this happen? Follow me. Twitter, David Paulides at CanAm Missing. Find my books at the links right below the screen here. And please post this on your social media. Give it as much exposure as you can. Do something good for somebody this week. Just something. And if you have the time, go donate a day at a soup kitchen. You'll appreciate life much better, much more. Thanks for being here. Paulides out.